the problem here is that if we look back across this terrible century that we've just completed, murder occurred on an unimagined and frankly still unimaginable scale, and it was done primarily by societies which were formerly atheist societies. Societies where atheism, which you advance here as this, as not the necessary good, the unavoidable good, that was the official orthodoxy. Stalin did not act in the name of Russian Orthodoxy. Hitler did not act in the name of Christianity. Mao did not act in the name of Confucianism. North Korea, which as you say, you still cannot remember without a shudder, is certainly not a religious state. It is an officially atheist state. So you make an argument about this in which you say that or suggest at least that these states were murderous because their leaders were acting on remnant religious impulses or appropriations of religious impulses. Is that really your position?
Yes, it is. I mean,
is that a fair summary of?
Yeah, it is also, by the way, a very good summary of my case. Though, just to tease people and make them buy the book, where I have a whole chapter on this, available fine bookstores everywhere. And everything.
It's a very fine chapter.
You don't. And I've now, because of course, this question comes up at every stop. I would now be able to write that chapter. That's the great thing about writing a book, by the way. You come into contact with the people and the arguments you should have met before you wrote it. It's not possible to say of fascism, which is the movement that invents the term totalitarian, that it's secular. It's just not possible to say so. I mean, of Mussolini, Franco, Salazar, the Ustasha, you know this very well because your church has been
Slovakia.
Yeah, Slovakia, where
yes.
the head of the Nazi puppet state was actually a man in holy orders.
That's right, Tiso.
Your father, your Holy Father and your church has been through agony about, can't still seem to apologize quite in the right tone about that fact and its implications. So that, I think, excuses the secularist, not for everything, but doesn't implicate them, of German National Socialism.
Wait a minute. You can't think of fascism as having a religious base. It was tolerated by religious conservatives and reactionaries in those societies, but certainly not. It was certainly not. I mean, in order, for example, for fascism to take hold in Bavaria, I mean, Pius XII had to gut the Catholic.
Oh, accountable.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Because we haven't moved the German National Socialism, but to be willing to concede, as at least the Church has been, that in Spain and Portugal and Italy and so on, it was essentially empowered by a concordat with the Vatican. I think you would not deny. Now, German National Socialism is a somewhat different thing because though it draws upon Protestant as well as Catholic Christianity and anti-communism, and I think above all anti-Semitism. And prayers were said, it is a fact, by the bishops of Germany every year in April, on Hitler's birthday, on the instruction of the Vatican. You can't say that that's a Catholic movement because they wanted to replace Christianity with German paganism and Nordic myths combined with ethnic blood legends and so all kinds of ghastly nonsense. And but still, you can't call that secular, by the way. It's still mythology and blood worship, and Odin is no better than any of these other imaginary figures. But it had a hatred for Christianity, I will say that, and it did also arouse some, which it didn't elsewhere so much, some very, very brave and distinguished and famous Christian opponents who paid for it with their lives and seem to have been glad to do so. I would not say National Socialism was secular in any sense at all, let alone atheist. And then remember of the third pillar of the Axis powers, the terrifying dictatorship of Hirohito. It's held in power by two considerations. One, its leader is not godly, but is a god.
Is himself a god, yes.
And its ideology is Zen Buddhism, which is the training of its soldiers.
This was Shinto, not Zen.
No, Zen too. Brian Victoria's book, which I mentioned in my book, Zen at War, absolutely confirms it. Zen discipline was the order of the day in the Japanese Imperial Army. Shinto too, I think it was actually more Shinto that trained the kamikaze idea, but Zen as well. The leader is himself a god. That's not a secular state by any means. By the way, I don't know if this is true because I haven't checked, but it comes from a good source. Some of you may know Michael Krasny, who does this brilliant show, and interviewed me the other day in San Francisco, home of the American Buddhist. Said, had I followed the genocide trials in Cambodia? And I said, you know what, I've been busy, I haven't been doing this. I probably should have done, I used to. Civil society has recovered in Cambodia to the extent that it looks as if the Khmer Rouge criminals are going to be tried for genocide now.
Right.
The Buddhist party in Cambodia doesn't want it. It says, why do this? All those people who were killed had committed sins in previous lives. This is a mental surrender, and a moral one too. This kind of contemplative nonsense, turn off the mind and you'll have bliss, has ghastly consequences. The sleep of reason brings forth monsters. That's Buddhism. That's Buddhism, the resort that everyone goes to when they've exhausted monotheism.
Right. I think it's a fair point. It's a fair point. But
well, I haven't got to Stalin yet, by the way.
It leaves aside the fact that the killer upon whom they're commenting or making this moral surrender was in fact an atheist. No.
Well, the name of you mean in Cambodia?
I mean Pol Pot, yes.
Yeah. Well, in Cambodia, all I know, and I know this much, is that the ruling power, the mysterious, ultimate, absolute, was called the Angkar, which is a reference back to Angkor Wat and the ancient Buddhist mysterious dictatorship that existed in the Stone Age of Indochina. Right. And you'll find, if you look into it, that the current extremely repellent dictatorship in Burma is also the great builder of Buddhist temples and the great mass producer of Buddhist statues and rules in the name of Buddhism. I'm not so sure that if you change your climate from east to west that you escape human irrationality or civility. It seems to me that it follows you wherever you go as long as you're willing to surrender your mind and to put your trust in faith. I think the outcomes there are always the same. Sleep of reason will bring forth monsters. I may not know much, but I think I know that much.
I think that's quite correct, but it doesn't get around the fact that Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge were an officially atheist party.
Well, I'm not sure, you see, if they were. I think they had Buddhist, a sort of ancient ethnic, pseudo-confessional, mystical nationalism to them. And I haven't answered your question about Stalin yet, and because I've babbled a bit, I ought to. I don't want anyone to think I've dodged it. Well, put it like this, with communism, which is, unlike fascism and National Socialism, officially materialistic. You're Joseph Stalin. It's 1917 in Russia. Millions of Russians have been told for hundreds of years that the head of the Russian government is something more than a human being. Not a god. It's not as bad as Japan. And not quite a pope either, but he's the Tsar is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. He stands between heaven and earth. Mm-hmm. A bit more like the Middle Kingdom. Servility and credulity is en masse inculcated right across the country. Millions of people know no better. If you're Joseph Stalin, who, by the way, this is an opportunist point of mine, but I have to mention it, was a long-time seminary student, had rehearsed to be a priest. You shouldn't be...
Was he not expelled?
I think he may have just cleared out, but
I think he
one
was
way or
expelled.
another.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be, if you're Joseph Stalin, you shouldn't be in the dictatorship business if you can't exploit a great pool of credulity and servility like that. There you have it. It's waiting. All you need to do is say, I'm the new Tsar. And what happens? A new inquisition, a heresy hunt, show trials. The traitors are among us. The heretics are here, trying to poison the wells. Miracles. Lysenko, our great new biologist, has shown how we can grow 25-foot wide tomatoes that will feed an entire family, Stakhanovite saints.
I get it.
The entire thing is completely replicated and collapses as the Inquisition did. And so now,
So Stalin is murderous because he's an imperfect
well, it's a
atheist?
replication. It's a surrogate for the same thing. It's a replication of a counterfeit, or if you like, a true bill copy of the same thing. But here's what you'd need to have a level playing field between your point and mine. You'd need to find a society hitherto pious and devout, and organic and stable, that adopted the views of and tried to teach its children the principles of Lucretius, Epicurus, Spinoza, Galileo, Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Bertrand Russell, the greatest atheist of his day and the first person to work out that Lenin was a new god, by the way, to adopt those teachings and then to see if that society fell into famine, war, tyranny, torture, gulag, and so on. That would be the fair test, and that test is yet to come. But I believe myself that we can recover the lost connection, the one that monotheism severed between Athens and Jerusalem. And we could get back a world where philosophy was valued. The beauty of science was considered worth studying and worth revering even. Where literature would be the key to the study of ethics and morality. And if you wanted the transcendent, you'd have love and sex and music. And you wouldn't need any supernatural permission for any of this nonsense. Well, I think I miss it terribly. I feel as if something was torn away from me before I was born by the loss of that. But we're smart enough to get it back. If only we will leave behind the hideous nonsense of the holy books and the vile preachments of those who want the world to come to an end.
Well, I'm for that. I'm for that.
Good.
Let's see.